So welcome everybody. Thanks for taking the time today to join us for our webinar, which is on probably quite a lengthy title, but technology, security and hybrid work primarily, and really about managing your digital workplace. Pretty topical and has been for a little while, especially with COVID and the pandemic. And we'll obviously talk a little bit more about that today and the evolution of hybrid work and the digital workplace, and hopefully have a few sort of takeaways and recommendations around what yourselves as businesses and organisations can do to help manage this evolution going forward. Just playing catch up with my PC. Apologies for the lag. So before we get into the slide deck proper, just a little bit for those. I think we've got a few organisations who already have a relationship and know VITG, but also a few parties who aren't aware of potentially who we are. So welcome to everyone, as I said. VITG, at its core, we're a managed services provider, one of the prominent providers in Australia and indeed globally. We primarily focus on outsourced IT services to a range of industries and clients. We have a keen focus, though, developed over the last few years around security as well. And if you joined us for our previous sort of webinar around cybersecurity and Essential 8, you would have seen that. We're 100% Australian-based organisation, and our team straddles all facets in terms of service desk staff, consultants, professional services, project management, etc. And as I said, with our keen focus on security in particular, we wanted to bring a bit of thought leadership around the digital workplace and hybrid work today for you. In terms of presenters and panelists today, so there's myself, head of what we call our go-to-market, which is really everything to do with product and marketing. We're joined today also by Troy Garner, head of our solutions team, James Allen, who is our general manager of customer relations, and also joined today by our chief executive officer, Daniel Garcia, who will be joining us for the panel discussion at the end and sharing some of his thoughts on more prominent topics around this, and also will be available during that session to answer questions that you may have as we go through. So in terms of the agenda today, we're going to take a look at what we sort of define as the digital workplace, have a chat about hybrid work, its evolution, as I mentioned earlier, and the future of it, where it's headed, why we believe that it's here to stay. And then we'll start to take a look at the key components around that from both a technology and, more importantly, a security perspective on that as you start to reevaluate your digital workplace models. And then, as I said, we'll have some time at the end where we'll have a roundtable discussion with the panel and pose a few important questions. We'll also, though, please feel free Q&A wise to put your questions into the Q&A, and when we get to that roundtable discussion, we'll with the help of the panel, we'll try our best to answer those questions at the end. So, just in terms of what is the digital workplace as we define it. It's really any sort of environment from a working perspective that exists outside of the traditional office environment. It's the digital workplace is what provides all the tools, collaboration, applications, etc., for employees to be able to basically work from any location at any time and anywhere that they have an internet connection. So in today's fast-paced world with connected devices, obviously we know our office and our corporate environments, but obviously the digital workplace is anywhere outside of that, whether it be a home office, whether it be at an airport, other locations that today we find ourselves, as I said, in this digitally connected world working in. And so when we talk about the digital workplace today and its relationship to hybrid work, that's really what we're talking about. So in terms of just this notion of hybrid work, its evolution and where we see the future sort of going in that respect. In terms of what the data is saying, there's been a number of reports done by the big four consulting firms and others, other management consulting firms around surveys of both staff of organisations, C-level executives and so forth around what's been happening around hybrid work. And what you can see there is over the last sort of few years and a projection into the future is that pre-COVID, we were sitting at around about 20% of the workforce kind of working from home, just over 30% working in a hybrid environment, which means that they were flitting both between home and sort of the office environment. And then almost half the percentage of the staff or workforces working in the office. Now, just to clarify, this is knowledge-based workers or professionals that we're talking about, obviously, when we talk about these numbers. And then in February of this year, the snapshot was that at home, as we would expect during the pandemic, has risen to about 40%. And that hybrid section there of people who had that flexibility to work in both environments crept up over the 55% mark. And the interesting thing was that even back in February of this year, roughly only about 4 or 5% of the workforce was actually working solely from the office environment. And even more interesting when you take a look at, we only have to go back to 2016 when the last or the census was done that year to see that only about 5% of workers were working from home back then. So you can see that sort of rapid transgression into those bigger numbers as COVID has kind of hit and taken stride. And then looking into February, projecting through to 2023, the interesting thing is that at home will start to sort of decline a little bit more in terms of solely at home, but the numbers of people that are expecting and wanting that hybrid and flexible sort of working environment increases to 70%, and the ones that are dedicated solely in the office are still remaining at that sort of below 5% level. So that trend we can only see continuing to sort of happen, and that leads us on to the statement around why we believe that hybrid work is here to stay. There's really sort of two key forces driving that. One, as we talked about, is the employee side of things. They really have this expectation now, particularly through COVID, of having expectations of hybrid working capabilities. And you've heard about things like the Great Resignation in the US during the pandemic, where people were starting to make lifestyle choices about where they wanted to work, and included in that has been that notion of wanting this flexible work or hybrid work environment. And there's a number of reasons for that. We have seen at that top point there some improvements in productivity, and whilst there's some debate still, and I think management teams of organisations are still looking and reviewing as to how to manage performance of their hybrid staff. It's clear that by cutting out commuting times and those sorts of things, and having a work environment set up at home, that we've actually seen a uptick in productivity and availability of people working. Definitely a focus on well-being, as I mentioned before. Employees are wanting that notion of hybrid work and want to see that continue. And also we're starting to see a bit of a shift in terms of people starting to vote with their feet with regards to looking at opportunities that offer them that hybrid work and flexibility. And so employers are having to take this into account now with regards to having some sort of flexible or hybrid work model in place. And I think the other thing that overlays all of this as to why we believe hybrid work is here to stay, not only the data suggesting it, is that I think with COVID and the pandemic, there's still no real roadmap as to how this is going to eventually sort of pan out. We talk about living and managing with the pandemic, but we can see that what's happening with case numbers and different variants of COVID and so forth, that things that we thought were maybe in the past, like lockdowns and mask mandates and stuff, are back on the table again potentially as we go through this, because nobody's been through this particular sort of scenario before, and we're still feeling away. So in that case, we can only see that that's going to continue to drive this this hybrid work and digital workplace environment. So that sort of setting the scene around what's transpired and the evolution of the digital workplace. We wanted to give you some nuggets around technology considerations and what we believe you should be taking a look at, given that we've been forced into the scenario of having to do something during the pandemic. What we're really here today to help you with is understand, have you done the right things? What are the sorts of things that you should be taking a look at when you look at your hybrid work models or digital workplace models, and that VITG can certainly assist with that. So with that, Troy, I'll hand over to you to have a chat about the technology side of things.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Jason. Yeah, so as far as technology is concerned in the digital workplace that Jason has just been introducing us to in the first slides, we can start, well, I'd like to start looking at the main challenges that an organization faces with working in this fashion. And I'd like to start with the three disparate points here. The first one is disparate locations, which from an organization's IT perspective, we're talking about multiple networks to worry about, both from an operational and security standpoint. We've gone from, if you think about it, we've gone from managing, for example, 20 employees, say, that's the size of your business, inside one branch or two branches, to 20 plus branches, where each one of those employees can potentially work from their home network. So businesses, whilst previously were able to control their digital environments behind a purposely chosen technology in a single office or two offices, now find that they've lost a bit of control. The second challenge there is disparate devices or data. We're seeing time and time again, and Jason touched on it previously as well, the rush to remote worker connectivity during the pandemic forced workers to basically make do with what they had, or businesses make do with what they had. And what we're left with is a combination of bring your own devices mixed with existing work devices. But when you think about it, it's not just bring your own devices, we're bringing your own networks where these devices are connected with the rest of the family's digital assets from the staff that are working from home. And then subsequently on these computers shared between family members and the workers, they may have saved a document to the desktop over here, or they may have Dropbox downloaded here where they've got some documents, or OneDrive over here, synced in their file explorers on their computers at home, meaning suddenly the organization's data as a result is left in bits and pieces all over the place. The third challenge that we've got down there is, I'm going to call it disparate meetings, because I'm going to keep using that word disparate. But the point here is that we no longer always have the luxury of sitting down all together in a meeting room with a whiteboard that everyone can see in this new working environment. Meaning we need to start looking at what technology we can do, what technology can do for us to assist with the collaboration in this new digital workspace. So how can technology help? And we'll start with listing down the components that make up a workplace or a digital workplace. Connectivity between your offices or the outside world. Collaboration tools we just mentioned before, the tools that your staff use to work with each other. Services, whether they're in the cloud or traditional, they're your business applications that store and manipulate the data that you need to do your work. Yeah, so back on the topic. So connectivity, let's simplify this. There's two components in your hybrid working from home. You plug into your public internet, your home internet. There are many different types these days, different flavors that caters for a whole range of areas and locations, NBN, 5G, Starlink even. There are many now ways to get connected. So there's not too much of a problem there, or there's less of a problem there. The next component is you click on something that instigates a connection to your workplace, which puts a private overlay over that public internet, and generally it's one point to another, so your home and to your workplace. If we go to the next slide there, the challenge we can say, and I can relate this back to the disparate locations and networks is when your workplace is in multiple locations these days. So we might have your database in Salesforce.com, for example. We might have some files in SharePoint. Your accounting application might be in a server still inside your office or in a data center. So there are better ways to do this remote access these days that will help the performance and productivity, and most importantly, the security in this kind of new world where your workplace is in all these different locations. There are technologies such as, SD-WAN, Zero Trust Network Access, which these terms you may or may not understand, but the point is that they are all available, and it's really important for today's organizations to review and ask for professional assistance to work out the best technology for your business. What about device management? So again, we can relate this back to the challenge of disparate devices and data. In terms of devices, how do we keep track of what devices are connecting to our business, and then let alone protecting them from all these devices that are potentially in unsafe home computers attached to unsafe family networks, or there's not much control there. Maybe they're safe, maybe they're not. And then in terms of data these days, how do we rein in the potential saving of company files to My Documents, desktops, Dropboxes that we mentioned before? So look, there are a couple of ways. One which is the hybrid virtual desktop, which will be touched on later in the pres. But another common way is to use a mobile device management platform, or MDM. And these platforms have also come a long way in the types of features they offer. You can use this platform to enroll all types of devices, being laptops, workstation phones, even printers in some cases. And they can be used to enroll only devices you want to allow access to your business. You can go a step further then and control which applications are allowed to be used on these devices. In terms of security and compliance, you can set rules and say, okay, only allow access from this device if the version of software is up to date, or if it has an approved antivirus software installed on it. And lastly, an important one is a method of, an MDM is also a method of data leakage prevention, which is something you may have heard, DLP, which you may have heard floating around. And basically, an MDM platform allows you to place a bubble around your work data on devices and prevent that data from ever leaving that bubble. For example, using Microsoft Teams on your phone. We don't want data in that Microsoft Teams, which is company data, to spill over and go into your personal WhatsApp account or any other personal environment, and also vice versa. So no personal can go into your work, which is important when it comes to privacy for your staff. On the next slide here, I've combined the collaboration tools and unified communications. And these components are, they're obviously very key to productivity in a hybrid world. I'm going to relate this back to the disparate meetings challenge that we saw earlier, where we're no longer necessarily in the same meeting room in front of the traditional whiteboard. I'm sure we're all familiar with Microsoft Teams Zoom software and have said you're on mute to someone at least once. That's a pretty old joke these days, but it's still topical. And these applications do fall under the banner of collaborative tools, but there are others. The Microsoft 365 suite, for example, cloud products, it's rich with productivity tools, and I urge all businesses to reach out to professionals for a conversation on what you could be using. Another example is the soft phone, which again is not new, but still most businesses use Teams and Zoom for online video meetings, but they don't realize these software packages and others like them can be used as a traditional phone as well. You can pick them up and dial a mobile, 0401 something. In fact, you don't even need to dial anymore. You can open up Microsoft Outlook and highlight the number and click to dial. They can also be used as your traditional IVR or directory when your customers phone in. Press 1 for sales, press 2 for accounts, etc. So this really opens up a very hybrid world where your call center receptionists can be sitting at home with a Bluetooth headset. So these are all in the cloud. There is not a lot you need on premise anymore to confine your staff to the office when using these tools. And the list goes on with other project management and workflow management cloud apps. There's lots of them, Microsoft Planner, for example. But when we're talking about all these, probably the most important comment one can make when adopting these online collaboration tools, which is getting back to the topic of security as an overarching and important topic for all technologies these days, that these tools can be adopted, but for all of them, there are back-end settings to address the question, how should this tool be set up to ensure my business is secure? 9 times out of 10, the out-of-the-box settings are just not enough. And again, I urge businesses to reach out to a professional to have these reviewed or make them make sure they're set up properly from the get-go. We can come back to security a little later. I'm just going to hand the slides over to James to talk about this hybrid virtual desktop that I touched on previously. The hybrid virtual desktop is kind of another way where we can contain the business and the business environment and data into a window that doesn't spill over to the home personal devices. I'll hand it over to you, James.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Troy. Great information there, mate. Yeah, look, like Jason said at the top of this, we've seen that trend, or that knee-jerk reaction from the pandemic. The technology that we're talking about here, it's not old technology. It's been around for a while, and some of the businesses that adopted this in the early days, they experienced little to no fuss when all this happened. So like what we're going to take you through is that flexible work environment. So that virtual desktop that Troy just touched on, it's basically like having the flexibility, enormous amount of flexibility, where your workers can work on their applications, either natively on their desktops or PCs or on a device using the cloud. So whether it's your laptops, your tablets, your iPhones, gives you and the business a lot of flexibility. It's also very secure. You can lock down that environment, which takes away the holes that we can have and the challenges that we can have, especially when you're talking about home network connections. So you've got a really hardened environment, which makes it a lot I guess less easy for the users to make mistakes that allow attackers to enter, which is pretty common. And we've seen a lot of that over the last couple of years when people are working on their own PCs, especially outside of the office. Also allows you to cocoon the environment as well. So you can have it isolated to that individual device or that user. So if something does happen and an attack does strike on that device itself, it can be quarantined, isolated, blown away essentially, and we spin back up a new virtual desktop for that user to then continue working on about 20 minutes, half an hour. So very little disruption to the business operations and super high level of security. Built-in business continuity and disaster recovery really speaks for itself. So nowadays you can have these solutions that have just come with this in mind. So it's already built in, ready to go. That automated seamless management that we're talking to there is we use a good example of managing users onboarding and offboarding. It's a pretty common one that especially with businesses over 100, 200 users, can be a bit of a challenge because they're seeing a lot of churn, a lot of people coming into the business, going out of the business. So managing licenses and permissions and applications can be a bit of a nightmare when it's all centralized and locked down into one environment that's systemized across the business. Super easy, really automated and seamless. So the other point that we're touching on there, and it's a theme that you're probably going to get sick of hearing from us is around security, is having that advanced threat protection. So having someone proactively monitoring and managing the threats and attacks. We're seeing a big uptake in phishing and even whaling now, which is a sort of next evolution in that phishing attack vector. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, so in terms of the cloud services and the hybrid desktop model, some of the benefits that you really want to be just exploring when you're making these decisions is, you know, what we've got here around data sovereignty. So where's the data being kept? Where's it stored? Is it are you regulated? Do you have requirements that have to have data onshore? In our case, obviously in Australia, having that any device, anywhere, anytime, gives you that, obviously, that flexibility, you know, to work in the office, on the road, on site, at other people's offices, you know, really super flexible, like we touched on earlier. Legacy environment. So this is a big one, and some of you on the call would probably understand this. You've got those big, chunky legacy environments that you've been working on for years, and there's a concern to move them because of the costs, you know, having to spend lots on equipment, starting over again, and the migration. So, you know, this is where, you know, you can get in touch with smart cloud providers that can make that seamless transition and be a lot painless and quite cost effective to do so. In terms of how VITG fit into the mix here, so, you know, we always talk about being first and foremost like a cloud provider. So last year, IT on Cloud, which has been a prominent name in the Australian landscape for cloud services, leading cloud provider, came underneath the Virtual IT Group banner, and they were first and foremost a cloud provider, born in the cloud, and they've been doing it since 1986. So very much, you know, at the start, and evolved quite successfully through all the different evolutions and iterations of the cloud to where we are today. So been supporting a lot of clients, and now successfully with VITG as well. 100% success with the migrations, you know, that sort of speaks for itself. You know, you want someone that's professional. You know, you're not gonna miss a trick. Get that seamless transition into the cloud, and nowadays, you know, we're seeing it, a lot of questions being asked from us as a provider and in the market. The ISO, especially 27001, being information security management, it's a big ask, and really it should be at the top of people's lists when we're talking to cloud providers. You know, making sure that, you know, you're dealing with a provider that has, you know, the top level security infrastructure in place. You know, in our case, we are able to scale our security across multiple organizations, whereas individual organizations that try and get the ISO standards, it's a big investment on their behalf. So it just doesn't become economical. So you can get that by proxy, you know, by working with, you know, someone like us that already has that, you have that security pass through.
Thanks, James. And I guess, yeah, you're right in terms of our approach and mentioning security a lot. It's a nice segue into the next sort of topic around this. And I guess just to close out, that what James was sort of talking about there with the cloud or virtual desktop side of things, it's just one of those components that Troy had mentioned in terms of the key sort of technology considerations around your hybrid work and digital workplace solutions. All these solutions are not obviously one size fits all. It's really about understanding, as Troy talked through, those challenges and how best for your business to be able to meet those challenges and overcome them by using those technology pillars, if you like. So yeah, so getting back to this notion of okay, so we've talked about the 5 kind of key technology components that make up best practice working hybrid work sort of environment. Is what about the security side of things? And we won't touch on this in too much detail, because we could have a whole presentation and have done and webinars purely on the security side of things. But I think it's important to kind of touch on it. And if you attended our previous webinar on cybersecurity and the Essential 8, you'll probably know a couple of these concepts we're talking about. But the key thing in terms of looking at your digital workplace is much like your corporate or office environment, where you invest and you spend time and effort on protecting the perimeters and the endpoints and so forth. Is how do you now take that and transpose that to the hybrid work and digital workplace environment? And so a lot of the challenges and cyber threats that we see in the corporate world, obviously by extension, extend out to the digital workplace. And so it's no secret the top to cyber threats have been and continue to be around ransomware and phishing emails. And then you think about the entry point, that's generally through staff sort of emails and so forth. So again, you've got an extra step added in now with the digital sort of workplace environment as to how do we cater for those sorts of things. And I'm just going to ask Troy just to talk about the next couple of slides as to our approach to that from a security perspective.
Yeah, cool. Thanks again, Jason. So talking about security, we've been talking about security and the protection for all the slides up until now. And we've mentioned before that it's certainly an important overarching topic, especially now in this changing environment. And here at VITG, we're always referencing industry standard security practice, one of them being the essential 8 mitigation strategies that you can see on this slide. For those who don't know, the essential 8 are 8 baseline or bare minimum controls that are required in order for security to be in place for your business today. And we can take these and extend and apply them across the hybrid workforce of today. And VITG have put together a platform or a stack of the tools and controls that we align with Essential 8. It's a managed security platform, and we definitely have taken into account the hybrid way of working today and adopted these tools and platforms to align with that way of working. If you go to the next slide, the top 5 digital workplace cyber threats that have been reported are definitely in line with what we've been talking about. Every component that they affect, we've spoken about today. And it's a matter of setting up or circling back to existing setups, ensuring that your new hybrid workforce is properly protected, and that's why we've put together this managed service, managed security platform together to try and do that. So we've spoken about the danger of disparate home networks, so that's number 1 there. Phishing and ransomware are more susceptible over personal devices these days. We're finding that, the uptick in that. Shadow IT refers to unsanctioned applications, again on disparate devices. And also the devices being lost or stolen is certainly a concern today, and remains today, and even more so with the different devices all over the place and the hybrid work, different locations, etc., that we've spoken about. And then obviously the threat of data leaks or DLP, data loss prevention, that we spoke about today. So all of these threats need to be considered. And again, it's really important to work with experienced professionals who are staying on top of this evolving world, so you can get the best assistance possible in protecting your business.
Thanks very much, Troy. And yeah, just bringing it back to those 5 kind of technology considerations that we brought up right at the start when you started going into the individual areas. Obviously, the concept here is that we hold security very dear and important, and it's about us being able to apply that dome of security or protection around those digital workplace technology elements that the teams just kind of talk to as well. So thanks for that, guys. So in summary, because we want to get on and have a bit of a chat around the roundtable, and also there's some Q&A side of things, just to summarise today's kind of discussion points. Hybrid work, in our belief and others, is definitely here to stay for the many reasons we talked about earlier. With that comes the numerous challenges that are unique to the digital workplace and hybrid work that Troy and James went through. But best practice or technology can definitely assist, and VITG can help you to overcome these challenges and provide those solutions to give you that secure environment going forward. Security, just to get the word in there for the 114th time today's presentation. I'll leave it at that. You realise how important that is to us and to you guys. And I think this concept of, whilst I think it would be rash to say that that COVID's over and we're kind of moving into the next phase, because clearly it's not. I think we have reached a bit of a tipping point, though, with regards to where organisations are with the pandemic, and learning to deal and manage with it, and start to think about their approaches to the workplace, both the office and the home environment. So we really do see this as a key time to reevaluate and have a look at your hybrid work model. We were all kind of rushed into this sort of arena, and some of us may have made sort of band-aid sort of fixes in order to meet the needs at the time. But now that we've got this bit of a breather as we're working out this next phase and evolution of hybrid work, it would be a good idea to reevaluate where things are at and what you need to do to get that hybrid work environment up to scratch. And obviously, as we mentioned, VITG's here to help in being able to provide a very secure digital workplace environment for you. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and we'll get into a bit of the round table discussion, and also we'll take a look at any questions that have come through. I don't think in the Q&A we've had too many questions come through just yet. What we might do is just kick off to the first sort of roundtable discussion item, and then we can have a look at those questions in the chat if they're there. So the first question, Daniel, I'm going to throw to you if we can. Given what we've sort of talked about today, I was wondering whether you might be able to share with everyone VITG's sort of experience with adopting, remote or digital workplaces, how this has kind of impacted our business over the past couple of years. And I'll make it a two-parter, that being the first part. The first part, if you could then maybe just share a couple of insights into what we saw with our customers and the market in general around the pandemic and the move to remote working.
Thanks, Jason. I'd love to share some of those learnings with everyone on the call today. I think first and foremost, virtual IT was always in a position to work from home, but I don't think anyone expected to work from home for this extended period of time, right? We always had the tools and the ability for staff to work from home, but it was this elongated or extended period of time where we couldn't work together as a team. So what we found is, different members of staff had different expectations or different wants or demands about when they want to come to the office or when they would like to work from home. So it's about blending and coming up with that hybrid workplace that, from a technology perspective, doesn't allow anyone to miss out or isn't disadvantaged if they're in the office or disadvantaged if they're working from home. So we had to find ways to engage our staff, and that was one of the most, I think, probably the biggest change that we needed to do. We needed the right tools in place to make sure that we could continue to communicate effectively with the updates of what's happening across the organisation, and allow staff to still work as teams, even though they're working from remote locations all across the country. Security always has been a focus. Given my background and where I've come from, security was always a thought. But working from home in such extended periods of time, we needed to rethink a lot of those techniques. Troy touched on the Essential 8, and they've been around. That Essential 8 has been around for quite some time. But a lot of organisations focus on protecting the border or the boundary within the organisation. So the office and the firewalls and stopping threats from coming in there. Now, as people are working from all sorts of locations, coffee shops, the beach, their home. Their kids downloading all the apps on their phones and then trying to do some work. The security landscape has changed. We need to find new ways to protect the organisation and the data that the organisation is entrusted with. The second part of that, I guess, of that question is a little bit more complicated. What we've seen with other organisations, and I'm sure all of you have seen Elon Musk's comments in the media, come back to the office 40 hours a minimum a week, or we expect that you don't want your job anymore. That's pretty forceful, and I don't think everyone's probably in that same position to force everyone back to the office without having the risk or concerns of people leaving the organisation. So I'm seeing a lot more people creating that hybrid workplace where people coming back part-time or 3 or 4 days a week, and as we come back to work as a team. I think people are wanting that, and organizations are wanting that too, that working as a collaboration, as a joint organization. We've seen migration from cities, so you've seen more staff moving to regional or coastal sites and not having to be so close to the CBDs, and so people are traveling, would like to minimize that amount of travel, and we need to create technology solutions that allow for that to happen. One of the not so good things that I guess I've been seeing is that rise of shadow IT again, Troy touched on it earlier, and that comes about because the organisation isn't keeping up to date with what people need. So that's a concern that I have for organisations, making sure that people aren't using public services or are leaking corporate information unwittingly or unknowingly, because the organisations haven't provided the right framework or the right collaboration tools to allow for that to take place within the organisation. Organisations rushed to these hybrid work environments, and what that has, security wasn't at the forefront or wasn't at particularly present at that particular time, because people needed to work first and foremost. And so I'm seeing a lot more organisations and leaders coming back to what security requirements are needed now, given that this hybrid workplace is here to stay. We're not going back to full-time in the office, so we need to come up with solutions that allow both working from home and working from the office, or whatever location that might be.
Excellent.
Does that answer your question, Jason, for you?
Yeah, it does. Thank you, mate. Especially as it was a two-parter, you've done that justice. Thanks for that. And I just want to say I only dialed into that call one time from the beach, so I don't know that necessarily counts as a set location. I might turn to Troy now, if I can, and just following on from your earlier discussion points, Troy. If an organisation wanted to reevaluate their hybrid work and digital workplace sort of models, what sort of suggestions can you give on how they should go about it in terms of that?
Yeah, okay, so I think, and Daniel just mentioned it just then previously, that where a lot of the work from home was rushed because people needed to work first and foremost, and companies needed to keep productive. So everything was kind of adopted quickly, all these remote tools and things. You saw a lot of growth because of that, and the vendors scrambled to make sure that their tools were up to date. And I think businesses using these tools need to do the same thing now. Partner with a professional company that can then take them through what they're actually doing today, point out that there could be better ways of doing it, and then retrospectively go and check and make sure that if they are doing the right thing, make sure that it's sort of set up properly and securely in the back end. Other considerations are making sure your systems and applications are up to date. There are always versions coming out that you can move them to the cloud. So you might have an application that still warrants in your business a server in the office, but actually the vendor has a new version that actually can be moved to the cloud, which is going to make it a lot easier for your hybrid workers to access. So yeah, basically looking at upgrading your IT infrastructure. There's also, depending on different business types, there's also corporate owned devices versus bring your own devices. That's always a question. And as I was mentioning before, bring your own devices is you can still use that model. There is technology to be able to cater for that. So just have a look, think about that. And if you're continuing down the hybrid path, I mean, simple things like, it's not so much about technology, but ergonomics for the home environments and how the home environment is set up, and whether it's optimal for your staff, and whether that kind of demarcation between the home office and the home and the office equipment, whether that's up to scratch for your staff, and whether you can do anything there or help out there.
Or is the dining table good for that? Is that a good economic?
Well, yeah, I mean, I use the dining room table. We only have a dining room table, but I come into the office nearly every day because I just find it easier. There's personal preferences, right? So other than that, I think just make sure you have a review of your infrastructure from a professional company.
Yeah, no, it's great, Troy. And actually, there's a question that's come through, which is on that topic you were just talking about bring your own devices. So the question from the floor is, how do organisations manage employees' home devices from getting hacked, i.e., a home router, bring your own, or a personal desktop and laptop that they're using at home, connected to the corporate network. So what's your suggestions there, Troy?
Well, I guess the answer is it's very difficult. You can't control your staff's home networks. So the tools that we spoke about today, and again, I urge everyone to reach out if they want to know more and understand more. So the tools that we spoke about today will actually sort of silo your work data and functioning away from those threats. So that's how we'll be approaching it.
Great.
Can I add some stuff to that, Jason? So
yeah, absolutely, mate.
The ITOC solution that James sort of referenced before and Troy was touching on, that's a great example where you can use your personal device or any device, including a mobile phone or an iPad, and remote into your remote desktop and be able to work on all your corporate applications, whether it's cloud-based or whether it's hosted because it's a legacy application. There are answers in that particular sense. There's other solutions out there too, where we can, VPN, Troy talked about it before, and connecting into the corporate network. There are checks and balances that can be conducted on that PC before it connects. So there's solutions out there to say, hey, make sure your application is up to date, your antivirus is up to date. You've got these controls before you connect to the network, and potentially punch a hole in what defenses you have built around that. So those are some examples of things that we can do. Jason, to your point earlier, not one size fits all. So it's about sort of understanding what you're trying to accomplish and the best way to do that.
Yeah, it's a good example. One of the ones that we've had recently was our internal service desk picked up some anomalies on one of the staff uses BYO devices for a client, and it was crypto mining. And it's like, oh, what's going on here? So we raised it with the company, talked to the user, say, hey, look, I know it's a BYO device, and they were doing what Daniel was just said, remoting into a remote desktop environment. So that was safe, but the device picked up that there was something, malicious potentially going on the device. It turned out that it was the wife's husband who put the crypto mining in place to try and earn some Bitcoin on the side with their personal devices. So it's a challenge across the board. It was a good question.
Yeah, great. Thanks, James. And we might just turn to you, James, and maybe just ask a question further on from your discussion around the virtual desktop and the cloud side of things. What do you believe the primary areas of focus to ensure that an organisation has the right sort of hybrid operating model, but in relation to the actual cloud environment and virtual desktop side of things? Yeah,
Good shout, Jace. So it comes back to the challenge that we're talking about today. How do we ensure that we've got a seamless strategy between those who are working in the office and out of the office remotely, making sure they've got they're well equipped to take advantage of the technology and the applications, so they can keep those efficiencies and keep their workflow happening. So the big one when we're talking to any organisation considering a move is you really need to start with the cloud first. So that's where you need to basically set your foundations, get that right, because how you set up the cloud infrastructure environment will really determine how you'll work in the office and remotely and on other sites. So it's really key to make sure that is set foundations right there. And the other one, which we've banged on over and above, is security. So making sure that we're managing the security challenges. New technologies are being adopted, and we're able to stay ahead of the curve in that respect.
That's good. Thanks, James. And I think that's pertinent information to that cloud first approach when you think about what we talked about earlier, and particularly Troy just mentioned about one of the first things you want to do if you're reevaluating your model is just looking at that cloud side of things, because the faster you can get your line of business applications and tools and software and everything else to the cloud from a digital workplace perspective, the better off you're going to be in terms of being able to give true access to that data from any place and anywhere in terms of your staff members. So I know that's good. Thanks, James. We've still got a few minutes. I'm going to go back to Dan, but please, people who are attending today, if you did have any questions for the panel, everyone's here around for a few more minutes, so please feel free to drop a question into the Q&A if you do. But Daniel, I wanted to just touch on further to the discussion and opening the kimono a little bit in terms of our scenario and what happened with us with the whole remote work thing. How do we as an organisation, or how would an organisation per se measure the performance of a remote or hybrid working model, do you think?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So, and a tough one for a lot of organisations. For us in particular, our metrics are pretty well known and understood. There is work that comes in, and across the organisation, we probably receive around 600 tickets a day across our whole offices. So for us, it's about understanding, making sure that work is completed, right? So we have some very strong measurements and metrics that we measure, and we achieve over 90% completion of the first day of resolution. So out of the 600 tickets, 500 and something of them get completed within the same day. So that's one of the key metrics that we use. And for all organisations, those metrics are going to change. But for a service-based organisation like ourselves, we want to make sure that our customers are back up and running as quickly as possible for those incidents, and for those service requests, making sure that the new users are added or any new requests are fulfilled as quickly as possible. For me, it was the intangibles in his hybrid environment that was a little bit more difficult to measure. How do we measure collaboration? How do we measure engagement with staff? How do we make sure we're effectively communicating the messages getting out there, for whatever it might be, from the management down to the whole organisation? So, my advice is to focus on some of those intangibles and making sure that there's measurements in place that, and providing tools that all those intangibles or difficult to measure outcomes are still being delivered, right? From opposed to being able to just solely work in the office where you can huddle around a couple of pizzas in the kitchen and talk about what's happening. That water cooler conversation is different today. And I'll go back to the point about, you don't want to exclude people who are not in the office, and you've got to find ways to bring the whole organisation together. And so we've had to work really hard on that. The core metrics and performance were pretty straightforward for us to continue to measure, and whether we work from home or the office, it's not as difficult for us to continue that sort of key measurement, but it's those intangibles that we had to find ways to make sure that we had that engagement keep going.
Yeah,
I think around those, sorry, Jason, I was I think around those intangibles, there's always innovation going on in the marketplace. So if you can think of something, oh, how can we do this? Chances are somebody has thought of a way to do something. So it's important to always keep abreast of knowledge and again, yeah, just keep on asking the questions.
And Office and Microsoft is continuously offering new tools and insights. I get daily digest emails of who's communicating with who, and if you look in Office 365, I can see who I collaborate with on a more regular basis, who I email, who emails me, who sends me reports, who doesn't. There's a lot of insights out there, so it's about getting access to that and working with a partner that can help you, surface that information for you.
Great. No, thank you for that. Like Troy, just we've still got just a couple of minutes, and I think we'll wrap up. But Troy, just I know we've talked a lot about security today, but on the business continuity side of things, any thoughts to kind of share about just following on from your advice around how to reevaluate your working model on that kind of business continuity, disaster recovery, and those sorts of things? Any thoughts to kind of share, particularly on that from a security perspective?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, business continuity and DR as a concept hasn't changed and still needs to be there. But I guess the way it's done these days is we need to have a conversation about it. If you're moving something to the cloud or doing something differently, or having workers working from home, we just have to make sure that all those facets are taken into account in the DR plan. So it's a good time to update your DR plan. But when you think about it, this whole pandemic and the move to work from home so quickly definitely tested a lot of companies' actual business continuity plans. Anyway, so yeah, if you found that that was very challenging to do that when the pandemic broke out, then it's a good sign that you need to keep updating these plans and stay on top of the different technologies that they encompass.
Great. And Troy, we just had a couple of questions last minute just around that topic that you were just talking about from Chris. Thank you, Chris, for dropping those into the Q&A. How often would we recommend that disaster recovery sort of tests or checks are kind of done? And the second part of that question was from Chris was, how do you know you've been hacked? I guess is just bringing it back a level.
So that second question is a good one. So in terms of the how often, it depends on what level you want the test. There is something called like a backup test that you would want to do quarterly. But if you want to do a full DR test, you can do that either biannually or a complete business continuity test where your staff want to go off site and test as maybe annually. Biannually is probably a good sweet spot. In terms of how do you know if you've been hacked? So and this is becoming very popular these days, and we didn't really mention it, but there are a lot of the security vendors and managed service providers such as us are doing like a 24/7 eyes on glass service that just keeps an eye on it. It's about gathering all the information and putting it in a spot where you can actually keep an eye on it and see if any malicious events are popping up. So that's important there. That's the best way of making sure that you're not hacked, because you're right. You can be hacked, but it's very subtle, and you don't know about it for a while until actually something real happens that shows you that somebody's in the system. So just keeping an eye on those with logs and technology and 24/7 services. Absolutely.
Great. Thanks very much for that, guys. We've just ticked over the hour mark, so I think we'll finish up very shortly. Just wanted to mention we will make available and share a copy of this webinar, the recording, and the slide deck as well. As Troy, Daniel, and James also sort of mentioned, please, for anyone who wants some more information or needs some more help around this important topic, please feel free to reach out. We're also going to do a little bit of a lucky draw out of the hat in terms of offering a free digital workplace or hybrid work sort of model review for a couple of the attendees today. So keep an ear out for that. We'll reach out to the lucky winners of that. And yeah, as I said, thank you very much to everybody for your time today. It's been much appreciated, and we hope to see you again soon. And thanks very much to the guests, to the panelists. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Thanks everyone.
It's great.
Thank you.
See you. Bye-bye.